They called her a relic even before she spoke. Commander Lyra Wren stood at the front of the lecture hall, illuminated by the cold gleam of overhead panels. Behind her, the display wall glowed with ancient images, iron helmets, napalm firestorms, cavalry charges, trench diagrams, thermobaric detonations. Her audience, 24 cadets from across the Galactic Coalition, some humanoid, some distinctly not, watched her as if she were an anthropological curiosity. She wore a terrestrial combat uniform. No nanoweave. No neural uplink. Just aged canvas, reinforced plating, and dust-colored webbing that creaked faintly when she moved. Her voice, when it came, was calm, unhurried, distinctly human. You've all read about us. Studied us. Simulated us. But you still don't understand us. A murmur moved through the room. One cadet, a sleek-scaled Cellari with eyes like molten silver, tilted its head. Commander, with respect, the Coalition has long since surpassed Earth's methodologies. Neural interlinked consensus targeting, sublight drones, predictive strike algorithms. Your species no longer participates in combat operations for a reason. Lyra smiled faintly. And yet they still teach you about us. No one answered. She tapped the console. The display changed to show a satellite image, grainy, black and white. A jungle. Then infrared overlays, small figures moving, disappearing. Explosions blooming in the underbrush. The footage jumped, cut, flickered. Screams from archived comms flared in broken waves. Vietnam. 1968. The Battle of Hamburger Hill. A human cadet frowned. Historical relevance, Commander? Everything, Lyra said. This was war before automation. Before battles were clean, bloodless, scored by computer. When fear mattered. When terrain mattered. When pain wasn't an algorithmic inconvenience, but a tool. She turned away from the display and looked at the cadets, each in their pristine uniforms, each calibrated by training routines that had long since removed risk. No mud. No hunger. No chaos. You think you've evolved past us. That's fine. That's expected. But evolution doesn't always favor comfort. The classroom door hissed open. Rear Admiral Solon Kor stepped inside, flanked by 2 protocol officers. His skin shimmered faintly with the biosheen of Senior Malcari caste, his voice low and dismissive. Commander Wren, this is an academic setting. We appreciate historical insight, but alarmism isn't curriculum. Lyra didn't look at him. I wasn't teaching fear, Admiral. I was teaching respect. He gestured, and the screen behind her vanished into black. That would be enough. Afterward, as the cadets filed out, a few lingered. Not to ask questions, just to look. As if by studying her closely, they could decipher what made her different. Perhaps dangerous. She left without a word. The next morning, her name was removed from the lecture roster. No explanation given. But she wasn't surprised. 3 days later, the simulation request came through. Officially it was a cross-doctrinal experimental war game. Unofficially it was a challenge. Someone, likely one of the senior Cellari tacticians or maybe that arrogant Charn officer with the glittering implants, wanted to prove a point. The game would be asymmetrical. Lyra and 12 volunteers versus a coalition strategic unit built from the latest interspecies tactical data. She would be allowed access only to legacy equipment, ballistics, camouflage, radio, no drones, no AI support, no orbital coverage. She accepted without hesitation. By the end of the week, the exercise began. The terrain was simulated but immersive, a vast forest environment projected across a domed training ground, complete with variable weather, elevation shifts, and sensory feedback. The coalition force, over 100 strong, was inserted by glidecraft. Lyra's team had entered covertly the night before. No insertion logs. No visible heat signatures. The first kill came 2 hours in. A Charn lieutenant, helmet severed by monofilament wire strung low between trees. Old-fashioned. Brutal. Silent. The coalition team stopped advancing. 2 hours later, A series of calm disruptions blanked out the eastern perimeter. Jammers, not digital, but analog, frequency hopping chaos. Physical interference. The kind their systems had never encountered in decades. By hour 6, panic set in. The coalition commander, a Galari named Vashan, initiated a sweep. 20 personnel moved into the ravine cluster. Only 16 emerged. One was retrieved from a tree, alive, but shaking uncontrollably, murmuring about whispers in the dark and faces in the mud. By midnight, Vashan called for a temporary ceasefire to reassess strategy. It was denied. The exercise would run its full 48 hours. Cadets from the academy watched live feeds from drones high above. But there was nothing to see. Lyra's team didn't show on infrared. They didn't use standard routes. They hit only when silence returned. Then disappeared. They used no code names. No AI-linked command trees. Orders were whispered in the dirt. Messages left in broken branches. Her people crawled through the undergrowth, stayed underwater for hours, coated their gear in soil and blood and moss. Some of the coalition observers accused them of cheating. They weren't cheating. They were winning. On the second day, Vashan's force was down to 22. They began surrender procedures. The drone feed cut to Lyra standing atop a ridge. No weapons drawn. No armor humming. Just an old service rifle, held casually across her chest. She said only one thing. This wasn't a war. It was a warning. The broadcast ended there. 2 hours later, Admiral Kor visited her quarters. His expression unreadable. The silence between them stretched. You humiliated them, he said finally. Lyra shook her head. No. They humiliated themselves. They're saying your tactics were inhumane. They were human. Kor turned away. The coalition will review the exercise data. But there are already complaints. From who? Everyone. She said nothing more. That night, she returned to the training grounds. Walked alone through the forest, still damp with mist from the environmental generators. Her boots left shallow prints in the mud, soft impressions that would vanish by morning. She crouched where the first ambush had been. A shallow trench, hardly noticeable unless you knew what to look for. This was where she taught them to lie still. To breathe through mud. To smell the wind and feel the tension in the leaves. She wasn't proud of the blood. But she wasn't ashamed of it either. The coalition had forgotten what it meant to fight. And somewhere out there, in the cold edge of map space, she suspected something else hadn't. The message came through at 0400 hours. A distress signal, broadcast from Outpost Calyx on the frontier rim. Human colony. Civilian populated. Last transmission. Unknown contact. Shield arrays failing. They're not responding to hails. Then static. Lyra stood in the observation deck as the stars shifted outside the glass. Beyond them, trouble was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be a game. Commander Lyra Wren had seen many things in her years of service: mutiny, orbital sieges, silent battlefields littered with bone and ash. But nothing unnerved her like the silence that followed a dying signal. Calyx's last transmission still echoed through her thoughts. Not the words, but the absence that came after. Not even a scream. Just a rising pitch of distortion, and then the sound of nothing. The Galactic Coalition flagged it as a probable system failure or environmental event. Routine protocol. But Lyra knew better. No system failure could shred 3 layers of shield harmonics in under 6 seconds. She stood before the Strategic Oversight Council 2 hours later. High Command had been assembled virtually, projected as flickering holograms and voice proxies. Kor was there, of course, his polished demeanor even colder than usual. Admiral Vralin of the Cellari floated midair in a containment sphere, tendrils coiling lazily around her vocal emitters. We need reconnaissance, Lyra said. Calyx isn't just a resource outpost. It's a communications node. If something took it, they've already compromised our border surveillance. We're dispatching a fleet, Kor replied. Automated recovery drones, 2 long-range cruisers, and a diplomatic emissary. We don't respond to panic with aggression. It's not panic. It's pattern recognition. Bralen's voice crackled like wet silk. Your species continues to interpret all unknowns as threats. Perhaps this is why your strategies have remained rudimentary. Lyra met the projection's eyes without flinching. Or perhaps it's why we survive them. The vote was held. Observation mission approved. Military intervention denied. Lyra wasn't surprised. She also wasn't finished. As the projections dissolved, she turned to Core. Give me one team. No. No resources, no support. Just a sanctioned deployment. Let me go in before you lose another colony. His expression didn't change, but his silence shifted. After a moment, he tapped the console. A notification blinked on her wrist display. Unofficially. You get 72 hours. It was enough. She handpicked her team. They met in Dock Bay 9 under low lights and low expectations. 12 in total, some old hands, some raw volunteers. Not all human. That was part of the point. Sergeant Miratolan, sniper. Earthborn. Quiet eyes, hair like coiled smoke. She'd fought during the last real insurgency on Vega Prime and had a scar across her cheek she never explained. Jarek, ex-military logistics turned demolitions expert. Broad-shouldered, with a nervous laugh that always preceded something getting blown to pieces. Saranev, a half-cybernetic Falari with serrated claws and a tendency to hum old Terran lullabies under her breath. And Kesh. No one knew where Kesh was from, or if Kesh was the name, or the title. The alien had no discernible mouth but somehow communicated fluently, often sarcastically. Lyra had once seen Kesh disassemble a coalition recon drone using only 3 claws and a handful of gravel. He never wore armor. Said it slowed him down? They launched aboard a retrofitted civilian freighter, no weapons, no beacons, no escorts. Their course was logged as an archaeological verification survey. The coalition's version of plausible deniability. Lyra briefed them en route. No sugarcoating. We don't know what hit Calyx. We only know it bypassed 3 layers of planetary defense without triggering alerts. That means intelligence. Coordination. Possibly stealth-grade technology beyond current specs. What's the goal? Mira asked. Determine threat level. Assess survivors. Exfiltrate if possible. Engage only if necessary. Kesh tilted his head, skin shifting color faintly. Define necessary. Lyra smiled without warmth. If it breathes and it's killing civilians, you put it down. They dropped out of FTL 12 hours later. Calyx loomed beneath them, a blue and green shard adrift in cold black. The orbital station was dark. No comms, no heat signatures. No sign of debris or battle damage. Jarek muttered, "This place is wrong." They descended in 2 shuttles. No autodocking. Manual entry through an auxiliary hangar, half-sealed and coated with frost. Inside, the walls were scorched in strange patterns. Not explosive residue, more like pressure burns, concentric and uneven. As if something had pulsed through the air and bent metal like paper. They moved in silence, weapons low but ready. The first bodies were found near the central command deck. Faces frozen in mid-scream. No blood. No visible wounds. Just emptied. Lyra knelt beside one, eyes narrowing. There's no trauma. No neural burns. No puncture wounds. Vitals drained? Mira asked. Maybe, Lyra said, but her voice was distant. Or maybe they were just taken. As they moved deeper, the air grew colder. They found the colony's primary AI core offline, severed from the internal grid. Entire data vaults scrubbed. Not corrupted, cleaned. Intentionally. It's like they erased the idea of this place, Jarek said. Not just the people, everything. They found one survivor in the agricultural quarter. A girl. No older than 10. Curled in the roots of a synthetic tree. Eyes wide and unfocused. It took Lyra 15 minutes to coax her to speak. Her voice was brittle. They came through the light. What did? The ones who hum. Lyra exchanged a look with Mira. The girl's heartbeat was normal, no signs of implants or external tampering. Did they hurt you? No. They didn't see me. I was in the tree. What happened to the others? The girl didn't answer. She just started humming. A soft, warbling tune that didn't seem to follow any scale Lyra recognized. They extracted her immediately. Back aboard the freighter, Lyra recorded the findings, encrypted the files, and transmitted a burst code report to Coalition Command. 2 hours later, they received a reply. The Coalition was dispatching a full diplomatic envoy, accompanied by an AI-regulated peace fleet. They requested Lyra's team vacate the system to avoid complicating the response. Lyra stared at the message for a long time. Then she ordered a course change. Where are we going? Jarek asked. To the next outpost on the fringe. Orders? We don't need them. By the time they reached Elian's reach, it was already gone. No signal. No trace. Just a crater in space and faint radiation burn patterns across the nearest asteroid field. Whatever had hit Calyx wasn't just an anomaly. It was a campaign. Lyra stood at the viewport, jaw clenched. They're not invading, she said quietly. They're consuming. Kesh hissed, his skin darkening to a shade Lyra had never seen before. There is no record of this, he said. No precedent. There is now. Mira stepped beside her, arms folded. So what do? We prepare, Lyra said. We go back. We build a response. But not one they'll expect. And if the Coalition still won't listen? Lyra's eyes narrowed, voice quiet as steel. Then we show them what listening costs. When they jumped back to Coalition space, the diplomatic envoy to Calyx had already vanished. No survivors. No data. Just one final transmission before blackout, a single audio file, corrupted and barely legible. A voice. Female. Possibly human. Her team disembarked behind her, silent but ready. Mira was first, scanning the horizon with optical enhancements already tuned to detect movement and irregular heat. Jarek carried a bundle of low-tech explosives over one shoulder, whistling under his breath. Kesh clicked softly, his translucent claws flexing. The others followed, forming a loose perimeter without being asked. It was muscle memory now, drilled into them by necessity, not doctrine. The enemy was invisible. It never was, not until it was too late. But Lyra had learned to read the signs. They moved quickly to reinforce the outposts, little more than prefabricated walls and subterranean tunnels, retrofitted with scavenged munitions and power cells. Coalition High Command had neither sanctioned nor supplied them. Every bullet they carried, every ration they shared, was begged, borrowed, or stolen. Lyra stood at the center of the underground map room and placed a red marker on the table. 3 incursions in the last 6 days. Same pattern. No warning. No survivors. But they don't take infrastructure. They leave it. Scouting runs? Mira said, frowning. Like they're mapping us. They already did, Lyra replied. This is a stress test. Kesh tapped a claw against the metal surface. They adapt. You hit them with gas, they seal their lungs. Hit them with concussives, they scatter like smoke. They aren't just learning, they're improving. And what do? Asked Ryan, one of the newer recruits, still barely 20 but already grim-eyed. We don't have orbital support. No artillery. If they come at us the way they hit Calyx. They won't, Lyra said. Because we won't fight the way the Coalition did. She took a deep breath and looked at each of them. This is where we make them bleed. They set the traps first, old human tricks that had no digital signature, no energy fields to detect. Pressure-triggered mines buried beneath layers of disturbed ground. Tripwires stretched between false rock formations. Tunnels designed not to funnel enemies inward but to confuse them, to trap them in killing zones where instinct would fail them. They stripped the outpost of all digital infrastructure. No power grid. No broadcast signals. Nothing to intercept or hack. If someone wanted to give an order, they'd shout. It was primitive. It was perfect. That night, Lyra sat on the outer wall, staring into the cold. Mira joined her with 2 cups of something strong and synthetic. They'll come soon. Lyra nodded. I know. Mira took a sip. You ever wonder why we're the only ones who still remember how to do this? Lyra's mouth twitched into a wry smile. Because we never forgot we could lose. You think that's what they need? The rest of the galaxy? No. I think they need to learn fear again. Not of us. Of failure. Of dying. Mira didn't answer. She didn't have to. The first contact came just after midnight. A sentry, an ex-Mars ranger named Sutro, vanished from her post. No sound. No alarm. Her body was found minutes later, drained and crumpled like a discarded uniform. No blood. No wounds. The enemy had arrived. Lyra gave no speech. She signaled with her hand, and the team moved. What followed was not a battle. It was a reckoning. The enemy came through the shadows, not humanoid, not describable in familiar terms. They shimmered like liquid obsidian, refracting light wrong. No mouths. No eyes. Just motion and mass and hunger. They pulsed with some internal rhythm that made the air shiver, a low hum that bypassed ears and went straight to bone. Lyra threw the first grenade. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't quiet. But it was loud enough to startle them, and that was enough. The explosion forced their formation to ripple, their perfect advance stalling just long enough for Myra's rifle to crack once, twice, 3 times, each shot embedding itself in the skull-like nodes they carried along their spines. Jarek's mines lit the southern perimeter seconds later, fireballs of dirt and heat erupting skyward. The creatures didn't scream. They just flailed, scattering like sparks before regrouping, faster this time, more erratic. Lyra shouted, and the fallback began. Into the tunnels. Where darkness wasn't a disadvantage, it was the terrain. They fought by feel. Traps went off one by one, collapsing corridors, gas floods, dead ends that sealed and ignited. Every move the enemy made, Lyra had already accounted for. And still, they came. It wasn't a question of whether they could kill these things, it was whether they could kill them fast enough. Lyra ducked beneath a clawed swipe, drove her combat knife into the center of the creature's mass, twisted, and kicked free. Black fluid hissed across the ground, corroding the dirt. The thing flailed, stumbled, then froze. Not dead, but confused. That was enough for Kesh to pounce from above and shred what remained. 3 flanking south, Kesh hissed. Trap 17, Lyra ordered. He nodded and vanished. By dawn, half the outpost was in ruins. The enemy was retreating. Not defeated, just regrouping. Lyra limped to the central watchtower and stared out at the blood-red sky. They'd won the first engagement. But it wasn't over. In the hours that followed, they buried their dead. Sutro. Kale. Aneth. 3 gone. Others wounded. Some beyond saving. But they were still there. And so was the girl from Calyx. She stood quietly near the perimeter wall, humming the same strange tune she had sung in the tree. No one had taught her how to hold a rifle, but she held it all the same. Lyra walked over and crouched beside her. They're going to come again, the girl whispered. I know. They're going to be smarter. I know. The girl looked up. Are we? Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she stood and turned to face her remaining team. They looked like ghosts. Burned, bandaged, bloodied. And ready. She paced in front of them, the way she once had at the academy, when she was nothing more than a symbol of a bygone age. They call our methods outdated, she said. They look at our weapons, our instincts, our chaos, and they call it primitive. But what they don't understand is this. She reached for her rifle, held it overhead. We never needed to upgrade our methods. Because war has never changed. Only the illusion of it has. Mira stepped forward. They're adapting. Good, Lyra said. So are we. The next day, The coalition finally responded. A full fleet appeared in orbit. Too late to help, too early to claim victory. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Kor hailed Lyra directly. "What is this?" he demanded. "What have you done?" Lyra stared at the transmission without emotion. "We survived. We held the line. You engaged without authorization. I fought because no one else would." Kor's face twisted. "The Council won't approve this kind of warfare. It's barbaric. It's effective." Silence. Then, finally, the Admiral spoke again, quieter this time. "What are they?" Lyra looked past him, out the viewport, into the black between stars. "I don't know. But I know this, they've never fought like us. And now they have." The line went dead. Behind her, Mara tapped her shoulder. "They'll send a delegation. Investigations. Hearings. I know. You going to comply?" Lyra looked back at the smoldering horizon. "No." She turned away from the fleet. Toward the edge of known space. Toward the war no one wanted to name. And she smiled. Not because she had won. But because now, finally, the enemy knew what it meant to fear.